everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome once again to the vast and ominous Comic Vault. Today we're going to take a look at a 4-issue miniseries that came out last year, and this is Galaxy Quest: The Journey Continues from IDW. This is written by Eric Burnham with art by Nacho Arons. Being a Star Trek fan, Galaxy Quest has always been a favorite of mine, and it's perhaps the smartest and most reverential Star Trek parody I've seen. It was clearly made by people who really get Trek and the sci-fi fan phenomenon, and the first time I saw it, I spent much of the movie nodding and smiling at the familiar tropes it lampooned, from does the rolling help to the horrors of being pulled apart and reconstituted on a transporter pad, which was always portrayed as the safest way to travel in Star Trek, except of course, when it wasn't. It turned inside out, and then it exploded! The almost exclusively all-star cast really sold it, with a TOS-like triad in Tim Allen, Alan Rickman, may he rest in peace, and Sigourney Weaver, who really felt like they had known each other forever, and each dealt with being washed out and having to resort to paying their bills on the convention circuit in different ways. There was an extra layer of comedy in seeing these high-profile, successful movie stars at a time when movie actors often didn't cross into TV land, playing once-beloved has-beens who were out of acting work after being typecast. But besides the clever homage and lovable jabs at the original story material, the history of Trek and what came or didn't come after, and of course the egos, Tim Allen as Shatner is a stroke of genius, what I appreciated most about the movie is that there was also a real story there about accomplishment versus popularity and the enormous impact a television series can have on its viewers, both positive and negative. It's a conceit, but I love that story concept of an alien species that believes the TV show is real, the ultimate fans that bring the show to life and force those actors to realize the indirect impact they've had, not just on their own culture, but on the very galaxy they pretend to explore. It could have been a really generic farce, but it turned out to be a hysterical but surprisingly compelling and heartfelt story. Well, there you go. Now I don't have to write a review of Galaxy Quest. I might get to it down the line anyway. Galaxy Quest isn't a property I ever wanted a sequel to, or that it even would have occurred to me that there might be a sequel to, and now there's talk about a whole TV show, which could be cool, but something I'm struggling to imagine would have legs. How do you believably keep getting these actors into space, or create a situation where they have to stay in space and explore it? I'm glad we're not looking at a future now where we might have a Galaxy Quest show on TV and not a Star Trek show. I wonder if you'll have to have a CBS All Access subscription to watch that show too. Anyway, this miniseries starts out reading like a storyboard for a direct theatrical sequel to Galaxy Quest and ends up looking more like a pilot for a show or the first story arc of an ongoing comic series, which is odd since this didn't spawn such a series for IDW. Perhaps the door was left open with this ending, but the readership wasn't there to keep it going, like there has been for the now extended Back to the Future series. An unspecified number of years has passed since what is essentially Galaxy Quest: The Next Generation was renewed. The relaunch is a few seasons in and enjoying enough success that there's talk of a potential feature film and a Rock Ingersoll spin-off, which is hilarious since Guy originally played an unnamed expendable crew member in the first show and is now popular enough he thinks he could carry his own series. I like that he decides to stay back on Earth for this adventure when the crew is called once again to be real galactic heroes instead of just playing them on TV, worried that fate won't be as kind to him a second time around. I also enjoy Tommy's fear that he might now be the expendable one, probably because he's the token black guy on the show. The comic, by the way, is called Galaxy Quest: The Journey Continues, named after the second iteration of the show whose title sequence the film ends with. But curiously, that show is referred to in the story as Galaxy Quest: The Continuing Adventures. Why the discrepancy? Especially when the comic is called that, so obviously somebody remembered what the movie called the relaunch, and Burnham demonstrates an intimate familiarity with the mythology and terminology of the movie. Although it's a little odd that there's never once a never give up, never surrender. That's the sort of mistake I wouldn't expect a series that's all about obsessive fans scrutinizing every little detail of a sci-fi show to do, and it's absolutely baffling to me. This is a sequel in the truest sense of the word, and Burnham's catalyst for getting the Quest actors back into space is inventive enough. When Jason activated the Omega-13 device at the end of the original movie, he saved his friends, but it turns out that decision had unforeseen consequences, which is great because that's what that movie is all about. It turns out that a rebellion of a lizard-like species species in a civil war, was finally about to take over their oppressor's superweapon and end the war. But when time was turned back, everyone experienced deja vu, knew what was going to happen, and the outcome changed to their detriment. So after doing some research, because it just happens to be a scientific theory on their world that such a time-reversing device is plausible, the Drythan rebels find out about the relationship between the Thermians and the Quest actors and come to Earth to force Jason and his friends to make up for the horrible disservice they've done to the Drythans and to right that wrong. It's not altogether less contrived than a species that can make everything from a TV show, and that thinking what they're watching is real would actually duplicate exactly what they see, rather than just make something of their own design and then search the galaxy for the NSEA and the Protector, and not to mention their ability to make a device that turns time backwards and not know what it does. I like that the thing that forces the actors on another adventure is the impact they left on an unsuspecting culture. That's classic Prime Directive stuff. Jason has affected the natural progression of a world, albeit one that seems about as advanced as the Thermians and the equivalent of a warp-capable species, but he's responsible for changing the course of that planet's history, and possibly others. There's a potential fascinating moral conundrum here, where Jason should be forced to make a tough choice like he does in the movie. There, he fires upon a warlike species and makes the Thermians' lives way worse than they were when he found them. He takes responsibility for that and tries to clean up his mess. Like a lot of Spider-Man stories like to tackle, both good and bad decisions can have unforeseen consequences, and no matter your intentions, it's still arguably up to you to rectify those problems. This is an even stickier situation because the person asking Jason for help this time is strong-arming him. Fix your mess, or we'll ruin the one thing that matters most to you, your reputation. These aliens are shapeshifters, or maybe they're just chameleons. There's a lot of talk about camouflage, and I'm still fuzzy on what it is exactly. And they threaten to become our heroes and professionally destroy their lives. But this would be getting involved in a planetary war, siding with one side to destroy the other's weapon just because you're told that's what would have happened if you hadn't changed time. Now, I'm not sure helping the rebels is the ethical thing to do, and even though he's coerced, it's played as if it goes without saying that's what Jason should do. There's never any discussion on the potential ramifications or the morality. If a species that was oppressing another, like say the Cardassians occupying Bajor in DS9, almost quelched a rebellion, but those 13 seconds shifted the balance of power, would it be Jason's duty to help the Cardassians win? Not even turn back time the way the original timeline would have gone, but to physically go there and make sure those rebels lost, despite the unjust loss of life and freedom? Would he be compelled to do that? If it were that kind of more dire situation, would he be willing to decline despite what would happen to his and his friends' reputations? These aliens aren't asking him to kill anyone just to help destroy a weapon, but how does he know the situation isn't as they're describing? That the other side will be left totally defenseless and that these Drythans will enslave them? Good thing both sides end up being kind of reasonable. And not only is there no talk about it, Jason never takes any real responsibility for altering history. He seems to only be doing this because he has no choice. He even blames Brandon for getting them into the situation in the first place, because apparently the Drythans would never have known about them if Brandon wasn't communicating with the Thermians on a Vox. So neither Jason nor the rest of his group go through any sort of character arc, learn anything, grow at all, have a tough choice to grapple with, nothing. And the day is ultimately saved by a Deus Ex Machina when it turns out the weapon can't harm humans, so they're easily able to dispatch of it. There was no reason for the Drythans to think the humans would do anything but get in the way in the first place, which they totally do, by the way, constantly leaping before they look for the sake of exciting action and TOS-like moments to make fun of more tropes, like in a monster fight that easily could have been avoided if not for laser fire that ticks it off. And side note, except to manufacture action, I'm not sure why they don't beam right outside the city where the weapon is. Why do they have to walk so far? It's a terrific, fun setup that's full of potential, but ultimately it's an unevenly paced story that's missing a lot of the human element that made Galaxy Quest such a wonderful film. Now you might be thinking, well, this is just a comic book, who cares? But it really, in the first two issues, made me think it was going to be like that. It feels like a manufactured setup for a lot of jokes rather than a good story. The humor is spot on, and there are some genuinely hilarious moments worthy of the movie, like Guy and Tommy singing the equivalent of the Gorn foreign fight music while Jason fights a doppelganger Drythan, and Alexander complaining that the Universal Translator can never relay alien units of distance. The characters all have the exact voices and personalities they did in the film, and while not everyone gets even a great moment, some characters go in exactly the direction I might have expected if I had considered a sequel, like Brandon becoming a scientist, staying in touch with the Thermians, and becoming a vital part of the crew, a la Wesley Crusher. His suiting up reminded me a little of Louis Tully becoming a Ghostbuster, except it makes more sense. I was actually kind of happy for Brandon instead of annoyed to see more of him like I might have expected. I like the social commentary about how rumors on social media can affect celebrities' images and expectations for a TV show. I even like the ending, in which a Drythan from the side Jason and his crew help defeat shows up and asks Jason to help him find them a new planet to live on with their spaceship, and our heroes have clearly created a chain reaction because of Jason's big mistake in the movie that might keep them in space as well as pretending on TV forever. That's meant as a tease for potentially more stories to come, and as I said, makes this read more like a pilot than a feature, but the story is paced so unevenly, it also reads like it's not really over. It's told in the traditional 3-act structure, but the second act doesn't begin until the 3rd issue, so the last half of the story feels hurried and careless. The pacing up front is deliberate, and I'm enjoying the downtime to live with these characters and enjoy their banter, but I feel tricked into thinking it's going to be about something more than the banter, and never really is. It feels like a lot of early IDW 2-issue miniseries with a great premise but a rushed ending, and a story that needed at least 2 more issues to really do its job. This one is a full 4 issues, and it needs at least 2 more. Except I think if Burnham had used his real estate more efficiently, he might have still had enough room to do something more compelling with this premise. There are maybe some wasted pages in the first issue, opening with the denouement of the movie again, and then showing how the Omega-13 affects the Drythans. I suspect that's there to play on nostalgia, and maybe because it's easier to put the bad guy with the sub-sandwich gun on the cover, even though he has nothing to do with this story. But while we know what happened already, we have to watch the Drythan scout catch our heroes up on everything, and with more flashbacks on top of his monologue. We get more information here, sure, but would we be confused if we learned about this with our characters rather than getting some of that up front? Maybe Burnham feels the need to remind us what the Omega-13 was, and to show it to us in scene again, to link this to the movie like a proper sequel. But then, why not just show some of those images in the flashback? Anyone reading this has probably seen the movie, and if they haven't, there's a ton here they're not going to appreciate anyway, so there's no need to hold anybody's hand. Burnham does his very best to make this humor work without line delivery and comedic timing, which he mastered in Ghostbusters. But sometimes it falls a little flat, and it really wants to be on screen rather than on page, so you really need the original actors' voices in your head to enjoy it to its fullest. Again, the dialogue he's writing for them is exactly what they should be saying. The art is also a bit of a detriment, I hate to say, mostly in faces and expressions. It's always a tough call in going with photorealistic images for characters we're used to seeing as played by recognizable actors, or this one, like Ghostbusters, going for a more cartoony, stylized look, so its characters theoretically look like who they're supposed to, but it's not trying to look realistic or exactly like whoever played them. I wonder if comic companies sometimes get a license, but with the stipulation that characters are allowed to be used, but not the specific likenesses of the actors. Boom's Power Rangers seems also to go out of its way to not look too much like the actors who portrayed those characters. And that's not the problem here. The issue is, some of these characters, especially the men, tend to look all the same. And I have to remind myself who's supposed to be talking. Jason and Guy, weirdly, are often easily confused. And I found myself really distracted by how often Guy would be irritated or outright angry, but appear to be smiling. I probably sound really down on this book. I did enjoy it a lot for its comedy and its satire about sci-fi TV production. I love Eric Burnham's writing, but this time around his dialogue really overshadows his plotting. I'm going to give Galaxy Quest: The Journey Continues a 2.5 out of 4. Join me next time on the Comic Vault, and thanks as always for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.